Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. One of the most fascinating things to see happen under the new pontificate is people essentially making their dreams known to the world as if they believe that Pope Leo XIV will make their dreams for the church come true. I've seen everything from he will mend relations with the SSPX, to he will fully restore the traditional Latin Mass and undo Traditionis Custodes, to he will get rid of all the trads and he will do this, or this. Most people will probably be wrong. There's a lot of wish casting, as some of us have been calling it, onto the new Pope. Sort of dangerous, especially in the eyes of those of us who have noticed all too many similarities between him and his predecessor on fundamental matters of church life. But be that as it may, this wish casting isn't only happening from conservative and traditionalist Catholics. This is also happening from the other side too. And this is almost a humorous story that I have for you. A nun, you wouldn't know it from the picture that comes with this article that you're about to see, has penned an open letter to the Pope asking him to ordain the ladies. Pretty sure he's not going to do that. Pretty sure. But then again, I have been wrong when it comes to how far I thought Francis would push things. So we'll see. But I don't think this is going to happen. However, this is a very real push you're seeing right now from the other side to demand that the Holy Father do things that no Pope should ever do. Let's go to her letter. This comes to us from CathCon, and they published this a couple of weeks ago, but the liturgy wars suddenly heated up in the U.S. for some reason, so that demanded our attention. But here is the headline. Not wasting any time, progressive demand that the Pope ordains women. Theologian and nun Martha Zeckmeister from El Salvador writes to the new Pope. There has been a growing discourse out there suggesting that lay theologians have been a net negative for the church. Lay theologians aren't exactly a new thing, but it's been a much bigger problem or bigger thing since after Vatican II. And I understand the spirit of it, but I also don't want to throw the decent, good, God-fearing Catholic theologians, lay theologians like Dr. Peter Kwasniewski and others under the bus, along with people like this nun. I think modernism and the toleration of modernism has been a net negative for the church, and that should be dealt with by the Pope, but I'm not confident. However, she demands this as a matter of justice, that people deserve it, that they've earned the right, that the church has been wrong on this. And when people make those kinds of arguments about something that had been the long-standing practice of the Catholic faith until recently, guess what? They're showing that they themselves aren't Catholic. They reject magisterial authority. So here is her letter, such as it is. I am delighted by your election. I am immensely happy that with you, a man of the missionary church, a man of true interculturality, a shepherd who smells of sheep, has been elected Pope, and I am grateful that your election promises continuity with the work of Pope Francis. He has brought back to the center of the church what belongs there, unconditional commitment to the vulnerable, the marginalized, the discarded. This is Jesus' practice, and we must mobilize all of our strengths for it. The choice of you and the name Leo, which you chose for yourself, give me hope that you will continue to lead the church forward on this chosen path. I myself am a nun and a teacher of theology. Last Thursday, May 8th, 2025, I and my students, all young religious men, watched spellbound on their cell phones and laptops in a small lecture hall in El Salvador as the white smoke rose. We were swept away by the spirit of the cheering crowd in St. Peter's Square. We heard your first peace be with you, and we were happy to hear this powerful word in a world torn by war. When you addressed us in Spanish and expressed your respect for the faith of Latin Americans, there was no stopping you. Brother Leo, I feel deeply connected to you and your commitment to a poor church, to a church of the poor. We are roughly the same age and share a similar biography, the calling to religious life, theological training in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, the process of moving away from one's own cultural identity means, from the global north, from a privileged society, to find our new home in Latin America, where we are so directly confronted with the wreaked havoc by the imperialist policies of the developed countries in other parts of the world. I share with you the happiness of what it means to be welcomed as a sister, as a brother, in a place where the gospel has immediate relevance, in a church where one does not have to artificially search for the meaning of faith, but where faith is, for so many, the daily bread of survival. Brother Pope. 50 years ago, I began my conscious journey in the church with the natural, perhaps naive confidence that it would only be a matter of a few years until we had found comprehensive fraternity in the church. A church in which there would be no longer hierarchies based on gender. I have placed my trust in a church that is guided by Jesus and his practice, by his way of approaching women and men. A church that will therefore, without reservation, put into practice a simple truth. Your Father is one who is in heaven, but you are all sisters and brothers. Leo, you are a reasonable yet sensitive man. When I heard your brief and clear address, I was very grateful because your sobriety and rationality contrasts so refreshingly with the populist and irrational rhetoric of the macho men who currently dominate the world. You are a canon lawyer. You know how much of the entire apparatus of the Catholic Church is not simply due to divine law, but has grown historically, shaped by the context and the respective cultural situation, and how much is therefore also subject to change. The only thing that truly should be the canon, the unshakable standard for how we should organize the church, is the way Jesus established community and how his disciples gathered in their congregations through their encounter with the risen one and the Pentecostal incursion of his Spirit. Everything else is man-made, historically developed, and can therefore be changed. Dear Brother Pope, like you, I am shaped by my order's charism. I feel indebted to Mary Ward, who more than 400 years ago broke the boundaries of what was then legally possible under canon law. She broke out of the walls of her enclosure and thus made a significant contribution to paving the way for the active apostolic work of women in the church. I think it is time again to break down walls and make room for the living Spirit of God. Leo, you are described as a man who can listen, and that's why I have the courage to address you with biblical parrhesia, with frankness, without fear, and without hesitation. It is high time that women be included, without any restrictions, in all offices and levels of the church. Not as a gesture, not as an exception, not as a symbolic sign, but with full equality. It's not about power, it's about dignity, it's about truth, it's about the gospel. To be clear, I really don't want this office. I've never wanted it, and at almost 70, that would be ridiculous. But I want to help transform the ministry, the office of service in the church, from the ground up. That we reshape it from the ground up, more Jesus-like, more fraternal. Not an exclusive privilege of one gender, but a shared service of men and women. This office will have to change in its symbols, in its presentations, in everything. I repeatedly hear the argument, now is not the right time, and such a step would provoke a schism. It may seem inappropriate to bother you with such a request just days after your election, but there will probably never be a right time, and the issue can no longer be postponed, because the schism has long been taking place. It is the slow, unstoppable exodus of women and men who no longer feel at home in a church that remains symbolically and structurally male. At best, this exodus occurs amid protest, but most often it occurs quietly, unnoticed, and frustrated. The scandal is not a bit of pink smoke over St. Peter's Basilica. The real scandal is that the representation of Jesus is still staged as a male privilege. The Catholic Church is a true master of staging, and this power of staging, used wisely as a prophetic symbolic act, is a precious asset. Pope Francis's first trip to Lampedusa, his kiss on the feet of a redacted migrant. I understand that you wanted to send a signal to some of your brothers in the College of Cardinals to extend your hand to them. When at your first appearance, you again wore the red mosetta and the gold embroidered stole that Pope Francis had discarded 13 years ago, and when you allowed them to kiss your ring. But precisely because you have a sense for these symbols, I also hope that you understand what a fatal symbol it is when at every celebration of the Eucharist, the central expression and center of the Christian community, we women are granted all sorts of things. We may read the reading. We may sing in the choir. We are no longer excluded from the sanctuary as unclean, and perhaps even may serve as altar boys. Yet the one who presides over the Eucharist, who is empowered to proclaim the gospel and interpret the word of God in the sermon, who invokes the presence of Jesus Christ upon the bread and wine, is time and again inevitably a man. This is not a minor externality that we women simply have to accept. No, it is a wound in the heart of the church. I am certainly not a feminist of the first hour, nor in danger of following any fashion trends, of uncritically submitting to the criteria of a secularized world. But rather, I was raised as a conservative nun. But we good women in the church, we conformists, those who have repeatedly remained silent for the sake of the greater whole, we are becoming guilty because we thus contribute to disfiguring the face of Jesus in the church. We must no longer do this. The gospel obligates us to rise up from our deformity, to look you men straight and clearly in the eye and to put an end to your male cliques. Not so that we women have more power, no, rather, so that our joint service to the world becomes more credible. Being a woman is not a moral quality, just as being a man is not a moral quality. We are sinners, but as such, we're called to make Jesus Christ present, both women and men, in this world that so desperately cries out for salvation. As women, we must no longer allow ourselves to be divided into the evil, aggressive feminists and the good conformists who keep the system running. And I certainly must not allow myself to be divided into the privileged women of the North with their luxury problems and the Catholic women of the South, who struggle for survival would teach them that what truly matters. It is about coming together as women in true sisterly solidarity across all cultural differences, standing together for a more just and humane world, and thus helping the church to take on a face more like Jesus. Many of my friends and companions have since moved out of this church. Some have become Protestant because they're allowed to exercise the ministry on an equal footing there. Others have entered politics because they can achieve more there. I understand both sides. Still, others have been stranded in disappointment, and this makes me truly sad. None of these paths are open to me. I am incurably and passionately Catholic to the core. I can do nothing but be and remain in this church. But that's why, with stubborn persistence, I expect from it the seemingly humanly impossible, that it truly, genuinely, and deeply expose itself to the transforming Pentecostal Spirit of God. One would like to shout to many clergy, don't be so afraid. Why do you cling so stubbornly and so rigidly to the exclusively male office? Have the courage to let go. Don't talk so much about evangelization, but let it happen to you. You will lose nothing in the process except your stubbornness and your fears. Rather, you will rediscover yourselves in a richer, fuller humanity, capable of selfless service to others, to this wounded world thirsting for healing and redemption. Dear Brother Pope, we have yet to get to know you, but I consider you a courageous man, a man who can allay the fears of his brothers at the same time as the courage to change what seems set in stone. I will be infinitely grateful if you continue what you began your papacy with, peace. Speak with courage and authority against the authoritarian macho men of this world and their deadly strategies. Stand up against the North's isolationist policies against migrants, but also the church to break down the walls that repeatedly exclude and alienate your sisters in faith, and those who carry this church far and wide. Women are just as capable of leadership and responsibility as men. Perhaps in some respects they are even better at it, just as the reverse is certainly true. I don't want this church to remain an archaic relic, a reflection of a social order that is no longer sustainable. I want us, women and men, to work shoulder to shoulder to change this world. And that includes beginning with the full integration of women into all leadership positions in the church. Immediately, not someday. With determination, love for the church, and burning hope, your sister Martha. And I thought that I sometimes don't have the respect, or I get accused of not having the respect due to popes when I get accused of saying, not always using the name Pope before saying their papal name. This woman just brought him down to her level. Brother Leo. That document, that letter, was one of the best written and also most heretical explanations for women's ordination I have ever seen in the years I've been doing this. She is calling on this as a matter of justice and as a matter of keeping the church relevant. The desire for the church to be relevant means that we must conform to the world's standards. It drips throughout that letter. We must keep the church relevant in a world that is increasingly hostile to us. Note that the salvation of souls never comes up in this because she functionally admits that you can find salvation outside of the Catholic Church. She believes that. The church has always said, no, you can't. But she claims that you can. This is not about the salvation of souls. She keeps saying it's not about power, but it is about power. She rejects what the church has always said about the nature of man and woman, which is that we are complementary. We're not the same. We work better together in our own roles. It's just the way it is. I don't think she's going to get very far with the Pope. But I presented this to you to show you that it's not just people on our side putting all their hopes and dreams on him. They are too. Whatever that means in the context of all the weird things we're seeing coming out of Rome in the last several days. I'm curious what you thought of that letter. Let me know in the comments, please. I'll have it at my show notes at returntotradition.org for your consideration if you want to read it for yourself for some reason. Let me know what you think about all this, and hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It absolutely helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.